Next presentation will come from Africa. Our guest is a distinguished guest, is a Professor Seifu Kebede. He received his PhD in Avignon in France. Today he's a professor at University of Addis Ababa in College of Earth Sciences. His expertise is in hydrogeology, in hydrology, and geochemistry. He published numerous papers. I had opportunity to meet Dr. Kebede in his Addis Ababa and also learn a lot from him about the hydrogeology in Ethiopia, and he also wrote an excellent book for the Springer famous publisher. So please, Dr. Kebede, we will listen from you more about the pressures on the water and water security in Ethiopia. Please.
Thank you, Professor, first of all, for inviting me here and for making it to Belgrade. I'm very happy because I was about to miss my flight. It was because of Mariana that everything was arranged. So, as Professor said, I come from far, from Africa. So the context of my presentation would be also a bit different. Meaning, sitting here this morning, I heard a lot about, for instance, sustainability. We have to sustain the environment, the social issues, the environmental issues, everything, regarding water resources management. But coming from Africa, the priority. So what is a priority? Is it sustainability or is it infrastructure development? So the governments in Africa are debating around infrastructure development. We have to invest and develop our water resources. What is that we sustain if we don't have it? That is their issue. So in any case, my presentation will be about presenting a case for need for sustainability, because what they are aspiring in infrastructure development is affecting the poor or affecting the human development. So unless otherwise we present a case for the need for sustainability, we want to convince our African decision makers to consider sustainability in infrastructure during infrastructure development. That is point number one. Point number two is, presenting a case for Ethiopia is a bit, I feel a bit ashamed of presenting a case for Ethiopia. Why not Ghana? Why not Kenya? Why not France or whatever? So when I say I'm going to present about pressures in water resources in Ethiopia, this could serve as a case for other countries where infrastructure development is very low and countries or people are suffering from lack of development, water resources development. And the third point, before I really start my presentation, is about this graph, a very known case of the linkage between rainfall variability and GDP, economic GDP for Ethiopia. There are so many other countries which would look like this one. So as the rainfall goes up, the GDP of the countries goes up, and where rainfall goes down, the GDP goes down, because most of these countries are agrarian. So agriculture is the backbone of the economy. So in this context, so what is sustainability? So is infrastructure development, particularly in storage of water, large dams for hydropower, for irrigation, for drinking water supply, without really too much worry about institutions and about sustainability, as if not buying a case. So my presentation will be about presenting a case where we need this sustainability. I'll show in my next slides. So my presentation will have four components. First, a bit about Ethiopia, then about the current drivers. These countries, developing countries, have passed through unsteady political, economic conditions over the last 100 years. So what Europe has enjoyed over 100 to 100 years around water resources, water basin development, river basin development, we don't know it in these countries because of upheavals in political systems in these countries. So it is only recently that countries have started to really strategically look into river basins and river basin development. So I'll present a bit about Ethiopia, then about current drivers, and about what are the state of the impact currently, and finally the measures that these countries are taking. Tropical Africa particularly, and Ethiopia specifically, is a difficult hydrology. Difficult hydrology means expressed in many forms. One is low storage. The aquifers are not big, like the cases that has been presented this morning. Large specific yield, large aquifers in northern African countries. This is a mountainous country. Aquifers are dissected, small pockets of aquifers. So the storage to recharge ratio is very small. So means the buffering capacity, the rainfall, the drought buffering capacity of these aquifers are very low in particularly Horn of Africa. That is problem number one, difficult hydrology. Second, most people consider Ethiopia, for instance, as water tower of Africa. But in reality, if you see the per capita water availability, it is around 1,200 meter cube per person per year, which is nearly around average. If you look into the long-term climate, the natural climate, the Horn of Africa region is sitting on a drying region. Yeah, someone was also presenting this morning about the Green Sahara some 5,000, 6,000, 8,000 years ago. But now that region is undergoing drying. That is evidenced from many paleoclimatic studies in the region. A typical example is, if you know Lake Turkana, for instance. Yeah? Lake Turkana has shrunk, the depths of Lake Turkana shrunk by nearly 100 meters over the last 5,000 years. Lake Turkana used to flow into the Nile, but no more now. So this cycle of drying is superimposed on human-induced changes and also other short-term climate variability like El Nino. Yeah? Short decadal scale variations are also superimposed there. And there are also other climatic forcings, very difficult to manage and to predict. If you look into predictions into the future, the GCM, Global Circulation Models, unlike most of the regions in the world, it is very difficult, in that region, particularly in Ethiopia and in the tropical Africa, you have very divergent predictions. The wet extreme predictions and the dry extreme predictions. Models doesn't match. So that is why we call this region a difficult hydrology region. Another characteristics, as a result of all this natural phenomenon, is Ethiopia is, for instance, known for stationary water and food emergency. Water and food emergency, for instance, this map shows in 2015 we have an El Nino impact, and nearly half of Ethiopia is under food shortage and under water shortage. So it is not only this year. This has repeatedly comes over the last several hundred years. Records since nearly 200 years have captured when this kind of phenomenon happened in that region. So now, decision makers are facing what to do to curb this systematic and stationary food and water insecurity. Obvious answer is infrastructure development. So it's not only the decision makers, but also some international partners, financiers, encourage certain developing nations like Ethiopia to invest or to focus on infrastructure development. But if you look into Europe, North America, and other countries which have very well developed their natural resources, first, they have gone through very long history. The Rhine River Valley is an example, yeah, very long history of development since, I don't know, 15th century, 14th century. You know, they have been investing gradually in the water resources infrastructure development and reached maturity now, and after maturity we can talk about sustainability. But when you talk to African decision makers who say we have to invest on dams and infrastructures. But what is the source of finance? That is a problem. For certain countries, like let's say in US, Colorado River Basin, maybe the gold rush has contributed, gain from the gold rush is invested on the Colorado River development. In Europe, maybe from knowledge economy to river basin development. But Ethiopia has no other natural resources, mineral resources, no oil deposits like neighboring countries. So there is no additional source of money for investment. So the country has opened recently to international land lease. So from China, from Arab countries, from Europe, from US. So the land, up to 2 million hectares of land is open to tender. So you can come and then buy land or lease land for 99 years and invest. This has come out of problem, not out of want. It is out of problem. So after having said this, so what are the drivers in infrastructure development? Regardless of the fact that I tried to show you the reason for calling for infrastructure development, there are people who say the current investment taking place in Ethiopia, it's huge, by the way, I'll show you later, is because of many other reasons. One, political economy dimension. Some people give it political economy dimension, saying that some African countries, to buy legitimacy of governance, to stay longer in power, they need to invest. This is what they call it developmental state model. So they have to invest and show to the people that they are doing something. Second is on guaranteeing food, energy, and water security. That is why we need infrastructure development. And third, for poverty reduction. And fourth, for risk reduction related to flood and droughts. But what is the state? So because of this, investment is happening now in Ethiopia. For instance, urban areas expanding rapidly. Rapid urban center expansion, urbanization means you need to cope in terms of water supply, to supply water to new suburbs, new industrial zones, new condominium houses, and dismantle the existing pipe networks because the urban growth is taking much faster than the infrastructure that you have. So this has caused what we call stationary emergency. All the time, investment made in urban water supply is because of an emergency shortage of water happening somewhere. Hydropower development. What you see in the top figure in the map is where, for instance, the circle, the blue dots show where currently hydropower dam construction is happening. So Ethiopia is investing to bring the energy generation from 2,000 to 20,000 megawatt in very short period of time, over a period of 10 years. Huge investment, largest dam, the tallest dam, 200 something in Africa or even in the world. The dam is in the other side, 6,000 megawatt energy generation. This is also the largest, going to be the largest dam in Africa. So construction of like this is happening currently because of energy requirements. Sugarcane plantation. Yeah? There are 10 sugarcane large farms being operated and run by foreign companies and by local companies, and for production of sugar. And then sugar export is a drive, job creation is a drive as to why we invest, or the country invests on sugarcane plantation. And large-scale pastoralist settlement. Yeah, pastoral, nearly a fifth of Ethiopia is a pastoral area. So there is a kind of encouraged, or I don't have the term for it, encouraged but forced resettlement of pastoral communities in villages. But there is a lot of controversy around this, a lot of question around this. Okay? Is it can it bring sustainability? Can it bring security, water security and food security if pastoralists settle in one area? So there are a lot of research around this. So as a result of this large investment, so the case I want to make, or I would like to show is, there are externalities, negative externalities that the countries need to consider. So in the next slides, I will show you some of the cases which could be presented and say, look, this is happening to us, or to you. Example, drying springs. If you travel around Ethiopian highlands, measured or reports show that discharge of springs have gone down over the last 2-3 decades. That lake, for instance, lakes are a typical big rain gauge, yeah? So that lake has shrunk over the last 30-40 years. So the shrinkage of the lake tells you the health of the catchment, what is happening in the catchment. So shrinking water bodies, shrinking lakes, shrinking wetlands. This is another example. Yeah. You compare 1987 and 2003 of a wetland around this lake, the eastern part of the lake, you see the difference. It's not only about shrinkage of the lake, but also sometimes you have bursting of lakes. Around the irrigation schemes, for instance, there is one typical classical example whereby irrigation return water via groundwater joined a depression, and that depression is filled. And that depression was originally, as you see in the lowest figure there, this lake used to be just 2 kilometer square lake 1960s. And now it is around 60 kilometers square. It was hypersaline lake with around 50 grams per liter back in 1960s, but now it is around 4 grams per liter. And this lake is discharging into the river, and this river is used by pastoralists and by irrigation areas downstream. So threatening downstream irrigation activities and pastoral water availability for pastoral communities. And the expansion of the lake has engulfed health facilities, inundated sugarcane farm, inundated railway. It's a railway connecting Ethiopia with Djibouti, inundated road. So it is because of that fast irrigation development, sugarcane irrigation development around the lake. So the lake has expanded. If you see the economic cost of this, it could exceed what you have gained from the irrigation infrastructure development upstream. So sometimes the environmental cost could exceed the benefit that you draw out of. Salinization is another issue. Erosion of cultural landscapes, meaning in the past, people used to manage land and water collectively. There is no separation between land and water for certain communities. Meaning, as hydrogeologists, if you go to the field, to the pastoral communities and drill boreholes here and there, we supply water, but we damage the pasture because cattle will flock. So the communities have their own way of managing their land and water. So going and drilling doesn't necessarily bring about the needed changes. Water scarcity, upstream diversion causing downstream water scarcity. This is another very good case to make. What's happening is because of, for instance, construction-related siltation of river basins. Yeah? River valleys are silted up because of construction booming related to urbanization. So because of this and because of pollution of the river courses, the production cost of water has sharply increased. So the production cost of water exceeds the water selling cost, the tariff. So there is a big gap between the water production cost and what the poor what the people are paying. So there is a lot of burden on the poor to pay for that gap. Okay, so what you gained from infrastructure development, irrigation development is affecting the poor, but you intended to reduce poverty at the beginning, but you are not achieving it because of these reasons. But it's not gloomy all the time, but there are measures that these countries are taking. Two success stories. One relates to the what we call agricultural growth program, and second one called sustainable land management program happening in Ethiopia now. In agricultural growth program, the massive people occupying dispersed in the country is being supported to utilize shallow and very shallow groundwater for irrigation development. Training around use of shallow groundwater. Some farmers are successful in using shallow groundwater for irrigation development. Groundwater served as job creation, innovation, like India, like 20, 30 years ago. And urban youth, jobless urban youth, are investing their labor in digging and accessing water using their skills. And technologies, different technologies are being utilized and imported in the country. But the challenge with shallow groundwater development is if you compare the available land for irrigation, the flat 3% flat land, compared to available renewable groundwater, what you could irrigate from groundwater is far, far smaller than available land. So how can you manage this? This is what Southeast Asian countries have faced in the past. So this is one of the biggest challenges and a big worry in the future for Ethiopia. Another success story is the Sustainable Land Management Program, well appreciated. So individual farmers are contributing 60 days of their labor for soil and water conservation practices, so that soil and water conservation happens at scale, 60 days of work. What is unknown is what is the economic cost of this. What is the economic cost of investing 60 days of labor on sustainable land management program? So that is my talk. So some change in the landscape is happening. Soil and water conservation is one of the success stories in that region. So in summary, I would say Ethiopia has a difficult hydrology. Managing difficult hydrology requires infrastructure development, particularly storage. Infrastructure needs investment. Investment brought about growth, income growth, witnessed by World Bank, IMF, or whoever witnessing what's happening there. But there is no clear link between growth and poverty reduction, because the poor are still getting poorer and being affected. And programs like Sustainable Land Management Program and AGP are meant to counter externalities and are bringing about visible positive outcomes. So thank you very much.